The morning of the 30th of June, 1908, began like countless others across Siberia. The forests were silent, and a cool mist drifted above the trees. Hunters prepared for an ordinary day, while reindeer grazed the taiga. Birds filled the air with their morning songs. Then, without warning, the sky exploded. Witnesses 60 kilometers away saw a blinding blue-white fireball. Some thought the sun itself was falling or the world had ended. Seconds later, the object vanished beyond the horizon. For one brief moment, everything became strangely quiet. Then came the blast. A shockwave tore through the forest with unimaginable force. Windows shattered hundreds of kilometers away. People were thrown from their chairs, and some were knocked unconscious. Others recalled feeling as though the ground had lifted into the air. The explosion flattened 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers. Entire hillsides were stripped bare, and massive pines snapped like matchsticks. The fallen forest formed a gigantic butterfly pattern pointing toward the center. When scientists finally reached the region, they found something puzzling. There was no crater, no impact site, and no giant meteorite. It was as if whatever caused the explosion had simply disappeared. News of the disaster spread slowly across the isolated wilderness. There were no satellites, no aircraft surveys, and few eyewitness accounts. Russia was entering political turmoil, making investigation a low priority. It wasn't until 1927 that Leonid Kulik led an expedition to the site. What he found only deepened the mystery of the flattened trees. At the center, many trunks were still standing upright, scorched by heat. The pattern suggested the explosion occurred high above the ground. Modern scientists believe a small asteroid or comet entered the atmosphere. The immense pressure caused it to explode in midair. The airburst released energy hundreds of times more powerful than Hiroshima. If such an explosion occurred over a major city today, it would be unimaginable. The Tunguska event remains the largest impact explosion in recorded human history. And yet, despite a century of research, questions remain unanswered. Exactly what exploded, and how large was it? Why did it disintegrate? When it did, scientists study it as a reminder that our planet exists in a shooting gallery. Every day, thousands of rocks from space enter the atmosphere. Most burn up harmlessly, though a few reach the ground. Once in a while, the universe reminds us how fragile our place really is. But the 30th of June is not remembered only for a force from the sky. On that date, history celebrated one of humanity's greatest attempts to understand the universe, not with fire, but with a paper that changed how we think about reality. If Tunguska revealed the power of the universe, the next story revealed our ability to understand it. 3 years before Siberia erupted, a young man sat at a desk in Bern. He wasn't a famous professor, and he didn't work in a prestigious laboratory. He spent his days examining patent applications, reviewing inventions from ordinary people. His name was Albert Einstein, and to his co-workers, he was just another clerk. Few could have guessed that, in his spare time, he was rewriting the laws of physics. The year was 1905, and Einstein was only 26 years old. He carried notebooks filled with questions that most people would never ask. What would happen if you could travel alongside a beam of light? Would time pass the same way for everyone, or were space and time connected? At the start of the century, many believed that physics was nearly complete. Newton's laws had explained planets, falling apples, and cannonballs for 200 years. But there was one growing problem, as light refused to obey the old rules. No matter how scientists measured it, the speed of light remained the same. It didn't make sense, and something fundamental was missing. On the 30th of June, 1905, Einstein submitted a paper on the electrodynamics of moving bodies. There were no television cameras, no press conference, and no worldwide celebration. The paper arrived at the journal's office, looking like any other manuscript. Yet inside its pages was an idea that would forever change our understanding of reality. Einstein proposed that space and time were not fixed, separate stages for the universe. Instead, they were deeply connected. Time could slow down, and distances could shrink. Two observers moving at different speeds might measure the same event differently. Both could be correct, as the only constant was the speed of light. These ideas sounded almost impossible. Even many physicists struggled to accept them. How could time itself change, or two clocks disagree, simply because they were moving differently? It seemed to contradict common sense. But nature does not care about common sense. It only follows its own laws. Years later, experiments confirmed his predictions with astonishing precision. Atomic clocks placed aboard fast-moving aircraft ticked differently from those on the ground. Particles traveling near the speed of light behaved exactly as Einstein had described. Even the global positioning system must correct for the effects of relativity every single day. Without those corrections, your smartphone's location would drift by several kilometers within hours. You are relying on a theory first submitted on the 30th of June, 1905. Every time you use GPS, the universe had not changed, only our understanding of it had. Revolutions do not always begin with armies or explosions. Sometimes they begin with a single person asking an unusual question. Einstein was changing humanity's understanding, but another man would soon capture the world's attention. He confronted one of nature's most terrifying spectacles with extraordinary courage. His stage would not be a laboratory, but the roaring waters of Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls had already become one of the greatest natural attractions in North America. Travelers crossed oceans just to witness it. They watched more than 3,000 tons of water crash over the cliffs every second. The roar could be heard from miles away, and mist rose into the sky like smoke. To most people, Niagara was a place to admire, but to one man, it was a challenge. His name was Charles Blondin. Born in France, he had spent his entire life perfecting the art of tightrope walking. He was already famous for his astonishing balance and fearless performances. But fame was never enough, and he wanted to accomplish something no one dared attempt. He wanted to walk across Niagara Falls, which many believed was impossible. The distance was more than 300 meters above the raging river. Powerful winds and constant spray made every step unpredictable. One mistake would mean almost certain death. Engineers stretched a thick hemp rope across the gorge. Crowds gathered by the thousands, and newspapers called it madness. Some came hoping to witness history, while others secretly expected tragedy. On the 30th of June, 1859, Blondin stepped onto the rope. He carried no safety harness, and no net waited below. Only a long balancing pole rested across his shoulders. For the first few steps, the crowd fell completely silent. Every movement mattered, as the rope swayed beneath his feet. Strong gusts pushed against his body, while the river surged below. Halfway across, Blondin did something that stunned everyone watching. He stopped, and calmly looked around at the enormous crowd. Then he continued walking, as though he were crossing a country road. When he reached the opposite side, thousands erupted into cheers. He had done what no one else believed possible. But for Blondin, one crossing simply was not enough. Over the following months, he returned, making each journey unbelievable. He crossed while blindfolded or pushing a heavy wheelbarrow. He even crossed on stilts, performing for the masses. He paused in the middle to cook an omelet on a stove. He carried his manager on his back, demonstrating absolute reckless trust. To modern audiences, these stunts may seem entirely absurd, but in the 19th century, they represented something much deeper. An age fascinated by invention and the belief that humans prevail. Blondin wasn't trying to conquer nature, for he knew the falls. He showed that courage is not the absence of danger. It is the willingness to move forward, despite it all. More than 160 years later, his name remains inseparable from Niagara. Countless performers followed, but Blondin will always be the first. History celebrates those who reach the summit, and those who start. Yet while Blondin showed the heights of courage, others found limits. It would unfold not above a river, but beyond the atmosphere. On the 30th of June, 1971, 3 men were finally on their way home. They had completed one of the most ambitious missions of the age. For more than 3 weeks, 3 men lived aboard Salet 1, the world's first space station. They conducted experiments, observed Earth, and proved humans could survive long durations in space. Their mission was a triumph. Everything suggested they would soon return as national heroes. As their Soyuz 11 spacecraft began its descent, mission controllers watched with confidence. The capsule separated as planned, the parachutes deployed, and the landing sequence appeared normal. From the outside, nothing seemed wrong. Recovery helicopters reached the site, and the capsule rested quietly on the ground. The rescue team smiled, as they had done this many times before. But when they opened the hatch, silence. The 3 astronauts remained strapped into their seats, and none of them moved. Rescuers first thought they had lost consciousness, but the truth became devastatingly clear. All 3 men were dead. There was no explosion, no fire, and no collision with space debris. Investigators discovered a small pressure valve had opened unexpectedly after the separation. The opening was tiny, only a few millimeters wide, but in the vacuum of space, that was enough. Within seconds, the cabin lost air and the pressure dropped so rapidly they could not react. Modern analysis suggests they lost consciousness in less than a minute. The spacecraft continued its journey exactly as designed, with perfect guidance and parachutes. Everything functioned flawlessly, except the one thing that mattered most. The cabin no longer contained air. Soyuz 11 remains the only mission where humans died in the vacuum of space. The tragedy shocked the Soviet program, and launches were suspended for months. The conclusion was painful, obvious, and the spacecraft had to be redesigned. Soviet and Russian crews would wear pressure suits during dangerous phases of flight. The change reduced the capacity, but it dramatically improved their chances of survival. It was a difficult lesson, learned at the highest possible cost. Space exploration has always demanded extraordinary courage from those involved. Every astronaut understands the risks, and every launch carries uncertainties. Yet history shows that each tragedy led to safer spacecraft and deeper knowledge. The sacrifices of Dobrovolsky, Patsayev, and Volkov were not forgotten. Their mission helped shape the safety standards that protect astronauts to this day. It is one of the paradoxes of exploration. Progress is often written through sacrifice. Looking back across the 30th of June, an extraordinary pattern begins to emerge. A mysterious explosion reminded us of nature's unimaginable power. A young physicist changed our understanding of the universe with nothing more than paper and pencil. A fearless performer crossed one of the world's most dangerous waterfalls on a single rope. 3 astronauts paid the ultimate price while pushing humanity farther into space. Different centuries, different countries, and different stories. Yet they all asked the same question: how far are human beings willing to go? Perhaps that is the true meaning of the 30th of June. A day that reminds us of our fragility. We are capable of imagining ideas that reshape physics. We can cross impossible distances, build space stations, and explore the heavens. And yet, against the forces of nature, we remain astonishingly small. History is filled with days that changed governments. But the 30th of June reminds us of more. It changed the way we see our place in the universe. And perhaps, that is the most important journey of all.